Thank you, Josh, and thank you, Sebastian. I think that I like the way you described it, as opposed to nagging, pushy questions about why are you doing this. That's good. One thing, I don't have slides. Sebastian's passed me this, but this is the second time I'm doing this. Last week we had an event at Imperial College where I did have a few slides, but I decided not to use them. So this time I thought, might as well just not put any slides, because then they're there and nobody's paying attention. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming here and supporting the amazing work. As both Andrea and Josh said, this is all fluff, right? The really interesting stuff is going to happen after me. It'll start after me, and then it'll continue for about half an hour. You'll see some amazing presentations about the work they've been doing. So that's the exciting stuff. What Sebastian and I are doing, kind of setting it up to tell you about what you're not going to see, right? And what's amazing about this program, and what's really hard about this program, is it really requires, it sounds really easy. You get 20 people, you give them some projects, you mentor them, and they produce amazing presentations and projects and code and impact. The reality is much more difficult, right? It requires a lot of people who both have the skills and the passion, because it requires both. Any one of them is a failure. And so we've got an amazing team this summer that has really made this possible. So I'm very thankful for all of them. And same for the teams that have done this for the last 6 summers, right? So when we started this program 7 summers ago, the motivation was we wanted to really, there were sort of few things happening at that time, right? One was, as is true today, in those days it was the data analytics hype, now it's the AI hype. But there was this hype around the use of data, use of evidence-based work, and unfortunately it was only large corporations that were taking advantage of that. And we sort of wanted to figure out why that is, and we kind of came up with 3 hypotheses. One was, for a lot of governments and NGOs, they didn't really know what they could do with data and machine learning and AI. Because when they would read Wired or BBC, it would only be about how Google uses AI to do something, or if it's government, how's it used for surveillance and scary things, as opposed to helping people. So they didn't really have use cases from their peers. But once they figured out what they wanted to do, they didn't have access to people. They didn't have enough people who they could work with. And if they had an idea what they could do and they had people, they didn't really have tools and methodologies, because a lot of the off-the-shelf tools were customized, again, for large corporations, right? So if a retailer wants to go figure out how to do pricing, they buy a pricing optimization tool and they tune it. If a telco wants to figure out which customers are going to leave, they buy a churn management tool and they tune it. And large consulting companies do a lot of that tuning. If a government agency has the same problem, if a government agency providing social services needs to figure out which of their clients aren't going to come back to them next week so they can do proactive outreach to keep them as clients and keep them engaged, they don't go buy a tool and tweak it. They hope somebody helps them. They don't even know how to describe their problem that way. And I think that was the initial motivation to see, can we take people who have skills that are critical in solving these problems, connect them with organizations who have these needs, and mentor them and train them to create a lot of these use cases, to create these prototypes, and to create well-rounded, as Sebastian was saying, individuals who not only care about these problems, but have the skills to solve them. And then while doing that, create methodologies and tools that are all open source that can be reused by project partners, right? And what sort of distinction you'll see as they talk about these projects is, it's not the relationship between DSSG and the organizations we work with is not that of a client delivery model, right? They're not giving us a problem, we're solving it and giving it them. It's a partnership model where we're both working together. They're helping us teach the fellows how to work on these projects, and we're helping them tackle a problem that's really important, that's really impactful, that they're already solving to some extent, but we could help them do it much better. So that's sort of that's the background for what's happening. About what you're gonna hear about are the very clean, nicely defined problems that come across. So of course that's how you would solve it. But if you went through the whole process of the starting to now, that was a very different process. So that's what the other thing I want to mention is the summer is, in some ways, just because our academic system is structured that way, it's an artificial 12 weeks, right? Things start and things finish in these 12 weeks. And so a lot of these projects, or none of these projects actually get finished, right? None of these problems are going to be solved in 12 weeks. And so most of this work we want to try and continue, right? So in the past, we take projects that start in the summer, we show that they're actually can be tackled by these organizations, and then we try to continue them as much as possible. And so I'm going to give you a couple examples of what that continuation looks like. Of course, that continuation needs, resources and support. But if you have that, so for example, one of the projects we started a few years back in the US, by the way, all projects that we do are really depressing, right? Because public policy is really depressing. You're trying to deal with issues that are depressing, and our role is to sort of try to help people who are trying to solve these problems. So one of the depressing problems it's not a big deal over here. Luckily, in the States, it's a much bigger issue, which is police violence, right? I'm sure you've all heard about it. So we started a project about 3-4 years ago as one of the summer projects in DSSG, where we worked with several police departments to help them identify police officers that were at risk of doing things they shouldn't be doing. Shooting people, injuring people, any sort of violence. And the idea was that if we can help the police departments identify those officers, they can then prioritize them for different types of interventions. It could be training, it could be counseling, it could be a cool down period. For example, we found that 2 of the big indicators were repeated dispatch to domestic abuse cases, especially involving children, or repeated dispatches to suicide attempts. And in the near term after that, they became high risk of doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And those are sort of stress indicators where you could think about different interventions. So what that started off as, we didn't know that was a problem we could even solve, we could even tackle, which would even make an impact. But we started that in 2015, and worked with one police department to show that it was doable. We then extended that in the next summer with another police department. We then ended up running trials and then implementing that inside those police departments. And then we licensed it to a startup, which was turning that into a product so it could scale and be used by multiple police departments. Another example, in a different area, which we're kind of in the middle of, is a project we started again a couple of years ago as a summer project, like you're going to hear about. And that was around looking at criminal justice, which again, US has a pretty terrible record of, where there was a county that wanted to reduce their recidivism rate coming into jail. One of the many depressing things about the criminal justice system in the States is that most of the people who are in jails have mental health issues, most of them, 65%, have substance abuse disorders, have chronic illnesses. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that those issues jails are not designed to deal and help with those issues. And they often cause them to go back to jail. And so one of the things we ended up working with the county was to help them figure out, how do I reduce the recidivism rate with mental health interventions as an outreach method. So if this person needs mental health outreach, and if I can give that to them before they come back to jail, could that improve their outcomes in life as well as reduce the recidivism rate for their population? And so as a DSSG project, in year 1, we did a prototype, and we found that yes, it's actually the people who are going to come back are actually identifiable. So the second step was to see, well, great, I can predict who's going to be at risk of coming back to jail, but who cares if I'm just predicting and watching it happen, right? The idea is to reduce that. So the next step was to see, if I intervene on those people with this proactive mental health outreach, does it reduce their risk of coming back to jail? And we just launched a pilot, a field trial. It's a randomized field trial that started in June, where every month we're giving this organization a list of people who they're going out and doing outreach. And we're measuring the reduction in recidivism rate over the next 12 months to show that it actually, the hypothesis that it works, but we don't know, right? And we'll find out over the next, it's about 9 months left to figure out whether it has a reduction in recidivism rate. So the reason I'm telling you this is kind of think of the projects that you're going to hear about as an initial prototype that shows that this is actually feasible. Because none of these organizations, or most of these organizations, haven't tried doing this before. A lot of them haven't even looked at their data. And what these fellows have already done is define the problem. That's often the hardest. Formulate it in a way that now you can use data and machine learning and AI methods to tackle them. And then given a prototype with code documentation, which is perfectly documented, everything is structured. They'll show it to you right after their talks. And what we want to do is then take this, validate it, put it in a trial, and confirm that it actually has impact, and then help them implement and deploy it, and then help scale that to other organizations who have very similar problems. And so in order to do that, one of the things we decided to do this year, after running this program at University of Chicago for many, many years, we collaborated with Nova School of Business and Economics in Lisbon to run a program there. And then out of that, we decided this year to collaborate with two places in the UK. So we had a program going at Imperial College that finished last week. And then this is the second one with the Turing Institute and University of Warwick to see how do these types of programs scale to new places. And to sort of support more of that, we launched a foundation, as Sebastian was saying, the Data Science for Social Good Foundation, that's designed to really expand these types of efforts. It's designed to help organizations, universities that are trying to run these programs, to create training programs, to incubate new ideas and methods and tools that are really needed for this work. And then to create a community just like this, to really do more of this, right? And so there are a few things we're launching that I also talked about last week. One is we're launching, kind of in the TEDx model, we're launching these DSSGX chapters that are going to be affiliates that have to kind of share our mission of doing social good, of openness, of collaborativeness, and of doing these projects ethically, because it's too risky if we don't. Right? And we already have a few of these chapters starting up. We have some in the US, we've got several in Europe, including here and Berlin, and then some in South America and Australia that we're talking to. So those DSSGX chapters give local universities, cities, groups a way to connect with the different types of activities that are going on and support each other as well as liaison with us. The second thing we launched very softly last year was this Solve platform, which allows people to do this type of work virtually by organizations who can submit projects that they're interested in, and volunteers can come help tackle these problems. Very similar to other platforms that exist in different areas, but more focused towards AI, machine learning, and social good projects. And then we're also going to be running more of these types of programs next year. And so to finish, too many things. The last thing I'm going to say is, it's wonderful that you're here. You're clearly interested in these topics, right? You're clearly interested in, you're not here only for the view, which is very well obscured. As Josh mentioned, the blinds might go up when they hear me talking about them. But I want to sort of, last week I was focusing on all the people who are doing, banking and internet and search and all the time they're wasting in their life. They should not do that and do something useful instead. But I'm not going to say that this time. Instead, what I'll say is, hopefully these presentations will both tell you how talented the people who've been working on these projects are, not just the 5 you're going to hear about, but also the other 14 and then the other 19 who were here last week. But also, hopefully they motivate and inspire you to get involved. And there are lots and lots and lots of opportunities to get involved. You can, of course, quit your jobs if they're not very useful, and ask us how you can help. But you can also do it in your free time. You can also take time off. So you can get involved through a DSSGX chapter. You can get involved through being a mentor, project manager in our programs. You can get involved. So come talk to us afterwards if you're interested in these types of projects and this type of work, because it's extremely rewarding. And I do it because I'm really selfish. I like doing them. I like working with organizations who are actually doing useful things. And if I can help them a little bit, selfishly, I feel good about doing that. So thank you very much. Thanks for coming here and supporting us. And come talk to any of us afterwards if you're interested in being more involved. So thank you.